behind manicured lawns and quiet cul-de-sacs. Maryland and Illinois hid nightmares that no one saw coming. A mother's body burned in a basement furnace. A landlord's head frozen in a kitchen freezer. A grandmother stabbed in her own living room. And a friend's blood staining an Airbnb floor. Decades-long sentences followed. But for the victims, time stopped the moment the knife fell, the match lit, the trigger pulled. Inside Maryland and Illinois' most notorious black female killers. Full list and shocking true crime cases. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Candace Craig. It started with a family secret buried in silence, and ended with a discovery that horrified an entire Maryland community. In May 2023, police in Hyattsville, Maryland, responded to a welfare check that would soon make national headlines. The woman at the center of it was Candace Craig, a 44-year-old daughter and caregiver to her 71-year-old mother, Margaret Craig. Behind their suburban home's front door, officers uncovered one of the most disturbing cases of domestic homicide the state had ever seen. According to investigators, the crime began after Margaret confronted her daughter about missing funds and fraudulent charges on her bank account. Prosecutors said Candace had been stealing her mother's pension and Social Security benefits, and when she was accused, anger turned deadly. On May 23, an argument erupted inside the family home. Candace's 21-year-old daughter, Celia Hardy, testified that she heard her grandmother scream, "I see ow," then silence. Moments later, Candace told her daughter to stay out of that room. What Hardy later found would scar her forever. The next day, she discovered her grandmother's body in a storage bin, wrapped in trash bags, with blood smeared on the carpet. Candace told her they needed to dispose of the remains, suggesting methods that sounded like something out of a horror film. Burn it, dissolve it, or chop it up. Surveillance footage later showed Candace purchasing gasoline and grill supplies at a nearby Home Depot. That night, neighbors saw flames in the backyard. When firefighters arrived, they found the remnants of a body smoldering in the ashes. Instead of calling the police, Candace tried again. Days later, she ordered a chainsaw on Amazon, attempting to dismember her mother's body in the basement. Investigators said the effort to hide the evidence was calculated and methodical. The crime unraveled on June 2, when police performed a welfare check after a family member reported Margaret missing. Officers immediately noticed the smell of decomposition. In the basement, they found 3 garbage bags with blood and what one officer described as possible brain matter. A chainsaw covered in human tissue sat nearby. During her 8-day trial in the Prince George's County Circuit Court, prosecutors presented forensic evidence and testimony from her daughter, who admitted helping dispose of the body under coercion. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before finding Candace guilty of first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and improper disposal of a body. In February 2025, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. State's Attorney Aisha Braveboyd later launched the Prince George's Collaborative to End Family Violence, citing this case as a wake-up call about rising domestic homicides. The tragedy left an indelible mark on Maryland, not just for its brutality, but for its warning signs ignored too long. It reminds us that family silence can conceal deadly danger, that financial abuse can escalate to fatal violence, and that confronting deceit without safety measures can cost lives. In the end, love turned lethal, and a daughter's greed burned away the last trace of mercy. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Sandra Kolalou. It began with the sound of breaking glass in the middle of the night, and ended with police discovering a human head inside a freezer. In October 2022, a quiet boarding house in Chicago's North Washtenaw Avenue became the scene of one of Illinois' most horrifying murders. The woman responsible was Sandra Kolalou, 36, a tenant who lived upstairs from her 69-year-old landlord, Francis Walker, a beloved church musician and piano accompanist known for her kindness. Their relationship, once cordial, had collapsed into hostility after Walker handed Kolalou an eviction notice. Hours later, that piece of paper would ignite a chain of violence that stunned the city. Around 2:30 a.m. on October 10, tenants awoke to screams and the crash of dishes. They heard Walker pleading, then came silence, followed by the sound of furniture scraping and one pair of footsteps pacing the floor. The next morning, Walker was gone. Calls to her phone went unanswered. Suspicion grew when tenants received text messages from her number, claiming she had left town and that Sandra would care for her dogs. By evening, officers arrived to conduct a welfare check. At that moment, Sandra was seen loading a large bag into a tow truck, which she paid for with Walker's credit card. Alarmed, tenants followed her to Foster Beach and warned the driver she might be dangerous. When the driver refused to take her elsewhere, she allegedly pulled a knife, shouting, "I said drive." Police arrived just in time. Searching the nearby trash, they found bloody rags. Back at the boarding house, detectives entered Walker's first-floor room. What they found froze them in disbelief: blood on the floor, knives in the sink, and inside the kitchen freezer. Walker's dismembered head, arms, and legs. Detectives said it was something out of a horror movie. Prosecutors later revealed that Kolalou had planned parts of the cover-up, sending deceptive texts, hiding body parts, and attempting to discard evidence at multiple locations. During her 2024 trial in Cook County Circuit Court, Kolalou claimed she was innocent. But forensic evidence, phone records, and witness testimony painted a clear picture. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder, dismembering a body, concealment of a homicide, and aggravated identity theft. Judge Ursula Walowski sentenced her to 58 years in prison. At sentencing, Kolalou stood silent, expressionless, her eyes fixed on the floor. Walker's family wept. She deserves none. The courtroom applauded when the sentence was read, a small moment of closure for a community left shaken. This case became a grim reminder that evil can hide in plain sight. It warns us to trust our instincts when fear whispers that something isn't right, to act quickly when a loved one disappears, and to never ignore patterns of aggression or deceit. They often precede tragedy. In the end, silence spoke louder than screams, and justice, though delayed, found its frozen truth. Number 3. Breante Thomas. It started as a quiet Sunday afternoon, until screams from inside a Maryland home shattered the calm of an entire neighborhood. On the 14th of September 2025, police in Fort Washington, Maryland, responded to a call that would uncover one of the most tragic family crimes in Prince George's County history. The accused was 28-year-old Breante Thomas, a woman from Waldorf, charged with killing her grandmother, 81-year-old Helen Thomas, and critically injuring her own father. The case gripped Maryland, not for its complexity, but for its intimacy, violence born from within a family once described as peaceful and loving. Just before 2 p.m., officers arrived at the single-family home on Bonhill Drive for a welfare check after neighbors heard desperate cries. Inside, they found a scene of chaos: overturned furniture, streaks of blood, and the elderly victim lying motionless on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Helen Thomas, once known in the neighborhood as the woman who never stopped smiling, died before medics could reach her. A man, later confirmed to be her son and Breante's father, was found outside the home bleeding heavily. In his statement to police, the surviving victim said he was in the driveway when he heard his mother scream. Rushing inside, he allegedly saw Breante stabbing her grandmother repeatedly. When he tried to intervene, she turned the knife on him, stabbing him several times before he managed to escape. "I just remember the look in her eyes," he told investigators. "She wasn't my daughter at that moment." Police immediately launched a multi-day manhunt for Breante, who fled in a white 2012 Volkswagen Passat. Her photo and vehicle description were circulated statewide. 5 days later, on September 18, detectives arrested her in Waldorf without incident. At the time of her arrest, officials said she appeared emotionally detached and showed no visible remorse. Prosecutors charged her with first- and second-degree murder, attempted murder, and related offenses. During her bond hearing, Breante stood silently as the charges were read. Her defense attorney requested a mental health and competency evaluation, citing concerns about her psychological state. The judge agreed, ordering she remain held without bond until the evaluation results were presented in court. The case sent shockwaves through Fort Washington, a typically quiet community just south of Washington, D.C. Neighbors gathered outside the home, leaving flowers near the driveway. "Helen was kind to everyone," one resident told WUSA 9. "No one could believe her granddaughter could do this." Police urged the public to see it as a reminder that domestic violence doesn't always look violent until it explodes. From this tragedy emerge hard truths. Unchecked emotional instability can turn love into danger, ignoring early signs of aggression can cost lives, and when family disputes escalate, intervention must come before tragedy, not after. These are lessons Maryland authorities hope no community forgets. In the end, a family's heart was broken from within, and silence became the only witness left behind. Number 4. Tiffany Hall. It began with a lie about new life and ended with 5 deaths that would horrify an entire nation. In September 2006, Tiffany Hall, a 24-year-old woman from East St. Louis, Illinois, crossed a line that even hardened detectives struggled to comprehend. Once known as a quiet babysitter and childhood friend to 23-year-old Jannie Perry, Hall would become the subject of one of the most shocking murder cases in American true crime history. According to investigators, the two women had been close since kindergarten and often called each other cousin. But behind Tiffany Hall's calm demeanor was a growing storm of instability. After suffering a miscarriage, Hall began telling friends she was still pregnant. Prosecutors later revealed that she had been thinking about taking a baby for weeks, a plan that would lead to a gruesome sequence of killings. On the 15th of September 2006, Hall lured her pregnant friend to her mother's house. There, she struck Jannie repeatedly with a table leg, bound her hands and feet with duct tape, and while the young mother was still alive or barely conscious, LaTosha used scissors to cut open her abdomen and remove the unborn child. The fetus, 7 months along, did not survive. Hall disposed of Jannie's body in a nearby lot, then called police claiming she had given birth to a stillborn child, hoping to use the fetus as proof. Days later, she returned to the victim's home, telling Jannie's partner that she had been asked to pick up the children, Demond, 7, Ivan, 2, and Jannie, 1. Between September 18 and 21, she drowned all 3 children in the same bathtub where their mother had been killed. The case began to unravel during the funeral for the so-called stillborn. Hall confessed to her boyfriend that the baby wasn't his and the mother was dead. He immediately contacted the police. Acting on the tip, officers found Jannie's body and, later, the children's decomposing remains stuffed inside a washing machine and dryer. When asked why she did it, Hall quietly replied, "I just wanted my baby back." Her arrest in St. Clair County sparked outrage and disbelief. During questioning, she admitted to all 5 killings, 4 murders, and the intentional homicide of an unborn child. In 2008, Hall pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without parole, calling the crime an act of calculated cruelty beyond comprehension. At sentencing, Hall showed little emotion. Her gaze fixed on the floor. Jannie's mother, Sandra Myers, spoke softly, "We forgive her, but she must live with what she's done." This tragedy left behind lessons carved in sorrow. Unchecked mental illness can grow into violence when ignored, jealousy and delusion can disguise themselves as grief, and trusting without vigilance can become fatal. In every tragedy like this, awareness is not just prevention, it is survival. In the end, one woman's desperation for life destroyed 5 and left a community haunted by silence. Number 5. Jannie Perry. A child vanished just before his 6th birthday, but the story his mother told was a lie that led investigators to horror. In December 2021, Jannie M. Perry, a 38-year-old mother from North Chicago, Illinois, reported her 6-year-old son missing. She told police that little Kimari Perry had gone to a party in Skokie and never returned. But as investigators dug deeper, that story began to crumble, replaced by a timeline of cruelty and betrayal that took place. According to prosecutors, the truth began inside the Perry family home on December 29, the day before Kimari's birthday. That morning, Jannie allegedly told relatives that her son needed to be punished. Under her direction, Kimari was forced into a cold shower as a form of discipline. He screamed, vomited, and eventually fell unconscious. Instead of calling for help, Jannie and her 20-year-old son, Jeremiah Perry, panicked. When they realized he wasn't breathing, they wrapped his body in a plastic trash bag and began discussing how to hide it. Days later, on New Year's Eve, they drove across state lines to Gary, Indiana, where they dumped the boy's body near an abandoned home and tried to set it on fire. Afterward, Jannie returned to Illinois and fabricated the Skokie party story, even involving her daughter as a false witness. For nearly a week, the community searched for Damari while the truth remained buried beneath lies. On the 7th of January 2022, investigators, working with the FBI, discovered inconsistencies in Jannie's account. Surveillance footage, cell phone data, and witness interviews exposed the cover-up. Guided by information from one of the siblings, detectives located Damari's body in Gary. The autopsy confirmed death by hypothermia, with internal organs partially frozen. There were also burn marks suggesting a failed attempt to destroy evidence. Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhart called it one of the most brutal and heinous child murders in our county's history. Jannie Perry was arrested the next day, hospitalized briefly, and then booked into Lake County Jail on 8 counts of first-degree murder, concealment of a homicidal death, and aggravated battery of a child. Her bond was set at $5 million. Her surviving children were taken into protective custody. During questioning, Jannie reportedly showed little emotion. The case drew widespread attention not only for its brutality but also because Jannie had a documented history with Child Protective Services. She'd previously lost custody of her children in 2014 following abuse investigations, only to regain it in 2017. At a vigil for Damari, his father Dalvin Driver wept openly. "He was the best thing you could ever have," he said. "I'm lost without him." From this heartbreak came painful lessons. Unchecked abuse thrives. When warning signs are ignored, children at risk need intervention before tragedy, not after. And family secrecy can silence victims until it's too late. Awareness and action remain the only true protection. In the end, justice found the truth buried beneath the lies, but far too late to save a child. Number 6. Brittany Norwood. A luxury store, 2 trusted co-workers, and one unimaginable night of violence that left a community terrified and betrayed. On the night of the 11th of March 2011, the Lululemon Athletica store in Bethesda, Maryland, became the scene of one of the most brutal workplace murders in U.S. retail history. The killer was Brittany Norwood, a 29-year-old sales associate once known for her charm, discipline, and athletic past. The victim was Jana Murray, 30, her colleague and friend, a graduate student at Johns Hopkins and admired by everyone around her. The night began with a confrontation over a pair of stolen leggings. After closing time, Jana discovered the item in Brittany's bag during a routine check. When she called a manager to report the theft, Brittany panicked. Minutes later, she phoned Jana, claiming she had forgotten her wallet, and asked her to come back to the store. Jana agreed, unaware she was walking into a trap. Security footage later confirmed the two re-entered the store just after 10 p.m. Employees at the Apple store next door heard shouting, the sound of furniture crashing, and one woman screaming, "God help me, please help me." For more than 20 minutes, Brittany Norwood unleashed a sustained attack, using at least 6 different weapons found around the shop: a wrench, knife, hammer, rope, and even a metal merchandise peg. Jana suffered over 330 wounds, including 107 defensive injuries. The final blow severed her spinal cord. When it was over, Norwood staged an elaborate crime scene. She moved Jana's car, returned to the store, and tried to fake a robbery and sexual assault. She placed men's shoes in the blood to create fake footprints, slashed her own clothing, tied herself with zip ties, and lay waiting to be discovered. The next morning, a manager found her moaning in the back room and Jana's body nearby. For a day, Bethesda was paralyzed by fear. Norwood's story about 2 masked intruders made national news. But detectives soon realized the story didn't add up. The intruders' footprints didn't lead out of the store, and her wounds were superficial. When police confronted her with inconsistencies, she broke down and whispered, "I just didn't want to get caught." At trial, prosecutors called the killing deliberate, savage, and premeditated. They argued that Norwood's deception proved calculation, not passion. The jury agreed, taking only 21 minutes to convict her of first-degree murder. In 2012, Judge Robert Greenberg sentenced her to life without parole, saying, "This was a nightmare crafted by design." The case, dubbed the Lululemon murder, sent shockwaves through Maryland's wealthiest suburb, sparking security upgrades and true crime documentaries that still haunt viewers today. This tragedy underscores chilling truths: jealousy can breed calculation, deceit deepens destruction, and pride, left unchecked, can cost everything. Every workplace conflict, no matter how small, carries unseen danger when truth and conscience are abandoned. In the end, one woman's lie to save herself destroyed 2 lives, and left an entire community questioning trust. Number 7. Nicole Lanett Ward. It started with a message on a hidden phone and ended with a single gunshot that shattered a Maryland family. In the early hours of the 19th of July 2025, police in Bowie, Maryland, arrived at a quiet suburban home after a 911 call reporting a shooting. Inside, they found 53-year-old Damian Ward lying motionless on the bedroom floor, a gunshot wound to his head. Standing nearby was his wife, 50-year-old Nicole Lanett Ward, who calmly told officers, "He betrayed me, and I lost control." The couple had been married for years, raising a young daughter and living what neighbors described as a peaceful, middle-class life. They were the perfect family, always smiling, one neighbor told Fox 5 DC. But that illusion collapsed after midnight, when an argument erupted inside their home on Old Chapel Road. According to police documents, Nicole had found her husband's second cell phone, containing photos and messages that revealed an ongoing affair. Furious, she demanded that he pack his bags and leave. Instead, the confrontation escalated into shouting, and then, silence broken by a gunshot. Investigators say Nicole retrieved a .357 Magnum revolver, pointed it at Damian, and fired once, striking him in the head. Officers who responded at 1:45 a.m. declared him dead at the scene. Detectives collected the revolver and multiple pieces of forensic evidence from the master bedroom. Nicole was arrested immediately and charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and the use of a firearm in a felony. At her bond hearing, prosecutors described the act as a deliberate decision born from anger, not fear. Defense attorneys hinted that the shooting might have been self-defense, citing emotional distress and an argument that turned dangerous. But for now, Nicole remains held without bond as the investigation continues. Damian's father, Greg Ward, posted a heartbreaking tribute on social media. "My heart is truly broken," he wrote. "My son was not perfect, but he was good, and he was loved." Friends called Damian a gentle giant and a devoted father. The community, stunned by the sudden violence, gathered for a candlelight vigil outside the family home. "We never saw this coming," one neighbor said. "They were just normal people." The tragedy reignited discussions about domestic violence and emotional escalation, especially among couples appearing stable from the outside. Law enforcement officials urged families to seek mediation before tempers reach a breaking point. "No argument is worth a life," said Prince George's County Police spokesperson Sherry White. "Beyond the headlines, the case leaves lasting lessons. In moments of betrayal or rage, stepping away can save lives, emotional wounds heal, but gunfire cannot be undone. Recognizing early warning signs, verbal aggression, control, or isolation can prevent irreversible violence. Most of all, confronting infidelity or conflict should never happen in the heat of anger." In the end, a message meant to expose the truth destroyed everything, leaving only silence where love once lived. Number 8. LaTosha Cunningham. It began with a night of bingo and ended in fire. An elderly woman's kindness met with unimaginable cruelty. On the 18th of May 2011, LaTosha Cunningham, a 38-year-old woman from Belleville, Illinois, waited in the shadows of a bingo hall parking lot. She wasn't there to play. She was there to hunt. Known by her aliases Net or Ned, Cunningham had grown up in nearby East Street Louis. A mother of 3 and self-described Christian, she often told people that her faith had saved her from her past. But that night, her past, filled with violence and greed, returned. Her target was 85-year-old Yoko Cullen, a beloved retiree who lived less than a mile away. The two women knew each other from bingo nights, exchanging polite smiles and conversation. Cunningham believed Cullen had just won big. Rumors spread she'd left with hundreds in winnings. In reality, it was only $60. But greed and paranoia quickly became deadly. As Cullen drove home in her gray Mazda 3, Cunningham and 2 accomplices, Daquan and DeMarcus Barnes, followed close behind. They flashed their headlights, forcing her to stop. Within moments, they dragged her from her car, stole her small purse, and stuffed her into the trunk. But then came a realization that sealed Cullen's fate. She had seen Cunningham's license plate. The trio drove to an isolated road near 11th Street and Falling Springs Road in East Street Louis. There, they beat Cullen with a tire iron as she lay trapped in her trunk. Cunningham then drove to a gas station, filled a container with gasoline, and returned. Together, they set the vehicle ablaze with Yoko Cullen still alive inside. An autopsy later confirmed soot in her lungs, proving she had been breathing as the fire consumed her. By the following morning, her charred remains were found inside the burned-out Mazda. Police tracked the killers through phone records, credit card usage, and surveillance video. Cunningham was arrested within days. In court, she fainted and vomited as the prosecutor described the horror she had orchestrated. On the 11th of December 2013, Cunningham, the ringleader, was sentenced to 60 years in prison without parole. The judge cited her history of violence. Nearly 2 decades earlier, she had shot and robbed another elderly woman. The community was devastated. Neighbors described Yoko as gentle, independent, and deeply faithful. Her family, overwhelmed by grief, asked for privacy, saying only that her kindness was her legacy. The case reignited debates over Illinois' felony murder rule. As Cunningham later claimed, she never personally struck the fatal blow, though evidence showed she ordered it. The story serves as a stark reminder: greed can disguise itself as opportunity, and trust misplaced can be fatal. Protect the vulnerable, question familiar faces when danger feels close, and never underestimate the violence that silence can conceal. In the end, a spark meant to hide a crime became the flame that exposed pure human cruelty. Number 9. Kimari Tousant. 2 women, 1 man, and a fatal mistake that exposed the cracks in Chicago's justice system. In December 2024, 20-year-old Kimari Tousant was already wearing 2 ankle monitors when she stabbed and killed another woman on a Chicago street. To those who knew her, she seemed like a young mother to be trying to rebuild her life, a nursing student, part-time hospital worker, and pregnant at the time. But to prosecutors, she was a violent repeat offender who should never have been released from custody. The victim was 20-year-old Jessica Flagg, a young woman described by friends as kind and ambitious. The two shared one devastating link: the same man. He was Kimari's ex-boyfriend and the father of her unborn child, now dating Jessica. That connection would spark 2 violent confrontations, months apart, ending in tragedy. The first came on the 13th of March 2024. According to court records, Tousant broke into her ex-boyfriend's home in Evergreen Park through a side window. Finding the couple in bed, she attacked Jessica, grabbed a knife, and tried to stab her. Jessica escaped, and Tousant was arrested. She later confessed to the attempted stabbing and was ordered to stay away from the victim. But when the court learned she was pregnant, Illinois law required her release under electronic home monitoring. Judge Ogarek reluctantly agreed, warning, she poses a risk, especially to this victim. 9 months later, the judge's fears came true. At 12:15 a.m. on December 29, officers patrolling West Chicago Avenue saw 2 women fighting on the sidewalk. It was Tousant and Flagg. As police approached, Jessica collapsed, bleeding heavily. She was rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital but pronounced dead, 6 stab wounds, 1 piercing her heart. The knife was recovered beside Tousant, whose arms were covered in cuts. She told police she acted in self-defense. Prosecutors disagreed, citing video evidence, witness accounts, and social media posts proving she'd initiated the attack. The story made national headlines not only for the brutality of the murder, but for the failure of the system meant to prevent it. Kimari Tousant had been under dual monitoring, one device from the sheriff's office and another from the probation department. She was still able to travel freely under the Safety Act's rule granting detainees 48 hours of movement time. Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart called the situation a tragedy we saw coming, arguing that too many violent offenders were being released under the guise of reform. As of now, Tousant sits in custody without bond, awaiting trial for first-degree murder. The unborn child she once claimed kept her out of jail will now be born behind bars. From this case emerge harsh lessons. Never ignore early warnings of escalating violence. Restraining orders and monitors are only as strong as their enforcement, and unchecked emotion, when fueled by jealousy, can overpower reason. In the end, one law meant to protect life instead allowed a second chance to destroy it, forever. Number 10. Sophia Negroponte. A diplomat's daughter, a night of drinking, and a friendship that ended in blood, one cut that changed everything. On the night of the 13th of February 2020, in a quiet Rockville, Maryland, neighborhood, police arrived at an Airbnb to find a young woman kneeling over a man's lifeless body. Her hands and clothes were covered in blood. The woman was Sophia Negroponte, daughter of former U.S. Intelligence Director Jannie Negroponte. The victim, her close friend, 24-year-old Yusuf Rasmussen, lay motionless, a fatal stab wound to his neck. Sophia, then 27 years old, was one of 5 Honduran orphans adopted by John and Diana Negroponte decades earlier. She had grown up surrounded by privilege, education, and diplomacy, yet struggled privately with addiction. Prosecutors later described her as a struggling, anger-filled alcoholic. Her father would later tell the court, Sophia's life has been troubled, a product of trauma and illness, not malice. That evening, Sophia and Yusuf had been drinking margaritas with a friend. It began as a normal night among old classmates, but alcohol turned the atmosphere volatile. Twice they argued, over what she later called a silly issue. Yusuf left the house, only to return moments later to retrieve his phone. Minutes after his return, a frantic 911 call was made. When officers arrived, they found Sophia sobbing and shouting, I'm sorry, over his body. According to prosecutors, Sophia stabbed Yusuf multiple times, with one wound severing his jugular vein, killing him almost instantly. She told police she didn't remember the stabbing, only that she and Yusuf had fought. Her blood alcohol level was later found to be more than twice the legal limit. The courtroom was divided. Was it a drunken accident or a crime born of reckless rage? Prosecutors argued Sophia's actions showed a depraved heart. The jury agreed, convicting her of second-degree murder in January 2023. The following March, Judge Terrence McGann sentenced her to 35 years in prison, calling the act a senseless killing fueled by rage and alcohol. The sentence exceeded Maryland's usual guidelines. In January 2024, however, the conviction was overturned by the Appellate Court of Maryland. The judges ruled that key portions of her police interrogation and expert testimony had violated her right to a fair trial. The case was sent back for retrial, reigniting national debate about justice, privilege, and accountability. Her father publicly welcomed the court's decision, saying, "We hope this marks the beginning of Sophia's redemption." For Yusuf's parents, no appeal could undo the pain. His father, Steve Rasmussen, called his son a gift, while his mother, Dr. Zeba Rasmussen, described the loss as a wound that never closes. This tragedy leaves lessons too heavy to ignore. Alcohol blurs reason until empathy disappears. Even friendship can crumble under the weight of addiction, and unchecked anger, once unleashed, cannot be recalled. In the end, A Night Meant for Laughter became a case study in how privilege, pain, and alcohol can destroy everything. Tonight's stories from Maryland and Illinois prove that even love, trust, and family can twist into something unrecognizable when rage and obsession take control. But these are not just tales of horror, they are warnings. Because every ignored red flag, every unspoken fear, has the power to turn ordinary homes into crime scenes. If you believe every story deserves to be told and every victim remembered, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to witness the next deep dive into America's most chilling true crimes. Until next time, stay alert, stay aware, and never underestimate the darkness behind the ordinary.